Well, hello there. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Mare, and this week I'm teaching myself embroidery. Well, kind of. I'm getting my feet wet because embroidery seems like a pretty large subject to learn all at once. If you're a returning visitor, it's very possible you think that that's kind of a 180 from where I've been for the past few weeks because I've been working on a small capsule wardrobe that I started probably about a month and a half ago before heading off to a family event out in Regina, Saskatchewan. The thing is, the last item on my list is a plain black blouse, and I've already got it cut out. You'll see that next week, I think, when I get that video up for everybody to watch. But I kind of want to jazz it up. So learning how to do embroidery is going to assist me with that. See, the reasoning was that I needed something that would pair well with either the coquelicot skirt or the Winslow culottes and would be suitable for wearing to a family member's celebration of life. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, a celebration of life is a funeral, but hopefully with a more positive outlook. Now, when I was first planning the blouse, the whole idea was that I would keep it as plain as possible to limit distractions and, well, to be respectful. Now that we're about a month past the actual event, that opens us up to a lot of possibilities and opportunities. So the blouse is actually really quite plain from the front, at least without some of the more interesting features that come with the pattern. We'll get to that maybe next week. But the back has a really nice yoke that can be used to feature a really cool fabric or possibly something like embroidery. And I have actually joked with the husbeast about putting something like, say, a bowling team logo on the back. I've got something else in mind right now. It may change, but the thing is, I need to learn embroidery to be able to do this. I was over at Michael's a few days ago and I noticed that they had a few little embroidery kits. And I mean, quite little. This is what I came back with. It's just a little bee, nothing too big. The kit contains a small embroidery hoop, the printed linen fabric panel, the cotton floss, 10 beads, 2 needles, and some instructions. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that I vastly overestimate the amount of work I can get done in a day. I'm hoping, though, that the little bee is just the perfect amount of work, and I've actually been kind of itching to get into this little kit. Embroidery was really the first craft that I remember really wanting to learn, and it's funny because I was probably somewhere between the ages of 3 and 7 as we had just moved into a new house and the welcome wagon had brought, say, like a goodie basket for the lady of the house. I guess somebody had told her that Mom was a crafter or something because there was a little embroidery kit, like a Sesame Street embroidery kit in there. And I think it was the Count. And I really, really wanted to make that kit. I remember Mom taking it away from me going, "No, you're too young and it's too difficult." Which I found was kind of weird because Mom was always, Mom always had something in a hoop somewhere that she was cross-stitching or whatever. And that's the thing, when we were growing up, it was usually cross-stitch or petty point. I don't recall her ever really doing embroidery. And the few times that embroidery came up, it was always, "Oh, no, that's too difficult. No, you don't want to do that. Here, do some cross-stitch." So that was what I grew up with, was a lot of cross-stitch and petty point. I remember asking her at one point, whether petty point was the thing to do after you'd graduated from cross-stitch because, I was kind of thinking of it as a progression, is you start with your plastic canvas when you're a kid, you go on to cross-stitch when, you're young and a teenager, and then when you mature, I guess you do petty point and probably embroidery. And I was told when I asked about petty point that no, it's too fussy, you don't want to do that. I have a really vague memory of somebody's mom getting us to do some sort of embroidery project when I was maybe about 10 or 11 years old, but all I really remember about it was French knots. Possibly a turtle, I'm not sure, but I don't think it ever hung around the house. I'm not sure whatever happened to the little piece of fabric that I played around with. So we do have these organizers around the house, and if I take a look at them, All of the handwriting on here, most of it, 90% of it is mine, because that was my job. She'd hand me all of the little skeins and tell me it was time to wind them for her. Man, this does not put you in a good light, Mom. Is that why I'm coughing so much? And so it would be, Mare, can you wind my skeins for me? And that's what I would do, is I'd wind her skeins. But she was actually quite possessive of her threads, because I can remember a few years back wanting to do a little cross-stitch sampler, and I asked her if I could swipe some of her threads. And she allowed me to take a couple of small boxes. It has mostly anchor threads in it, which was a rival, I think, to DMC that finally got bought out by them. And it's got information here on the conversion between anchor and DMC. So I was allowed to take off with the little anchor box. But when I was taking a look at some of her other boxes of thread, and I said to her, well, you've had cataract surgery, you can't focus on small things, how about I take those off your hands? She just got this deer in the headlights look, and it was like, no, I might need those. So when I went looking for thread for the upcoming project that I've got for the back of the blouse, there's all these little boxes full of threads, and I'm not sure whether these are separated out by any specific project, but that was usually her method of operation. You chose your pattern, you got an organizer box, and you put the skeins that you needed into that box, and only the things that you needed for that project went into that box. If you needed a second box, fine, but everything got put together. And it used to drive her up the wall, I think, that I would get like a kit that had all of the skeins with it, and yes, I'd use the little punch card that you could, you know, do a little, I think, lark's head knot or something to keep all of your skeins together. But I would keep that in a little plastic Ziploc bag. And I still do that. I've got a Ziploc bag here for another project. It keeps the fabric from getting anything on it. It keeps your pattern safe. And I think in some cases she did that for things that were just the pattern and the fabric, but definitely skeins went in the box. So there's about 4 or 5 little boxes around here. I think I've got one box that is full of skeins for a pattern that I've just never gotten started on that I really should at some point. It's a project that they gave me years back, probably in my 20s, that is on like a really nice green linen base. But I've just never gotten around to it. So I think that's probably one of the projects that should go on the list of things to get done. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see. But it is really nice to know that there are all of these little organizers that I can go to when I need to get little skeins for this project that's about to come up. So I think I am going to get started on my little bee. All right, so let's open this thing up and see what we've got. They really went all out on the amount of glue they used to hold this together. Okay, so we've got the beads, we've got the hoop, we've got the floss already pre-strung, silica gel, throw away, do not eat, instructions, a few small needles, and a little swatch of fabric. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to try to shoot the camera down towards my lap, so you probably won't be seeing this pretty face for a little while. But what you might see is the cat, who is tucked in between my legs, because cats, if she can find a place to nap and shed at the same time, she will. What's that? You going to give it a sniff?
stuff? No, don't eat it. Don't eat it. Let's let people see your pretty face. No, don't eat it. No, that's not for you. Not for you. No. I know. Hey, that's all you get. You keep that up, you're not gonna have a lap to sit in. Hi. Yes, look, you've already been destructive. Yeah, I know. Hey. Excuse me, young lady. How rude. That's rude. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Is the linen taking your camera? Nope. You've lost your seat. Down you get. Okay, that is a tiny hoop. Pull that nice and taut. Nope. Stay away from the camera. Stay away from the camera. I know you. Excuse me, young lady. Are you going to lunge at the camera again? Are you going to go after the dead cat? Of course you're going to go after the dead cat. Which isn't really a dead cat, but a fuzzy thing over the microphone. Which for some reason you seem to think is something you should be playing with. Time for your cameo? Time for your cameo? You have got me covered totally in cat hair. I hope you know that.
It often occurs to me later in the process that I'm using SMART goals to teach myself skills, usually because the whole concept of SMART goals hits a deep part of me still recovering from the everyday trauma of the working world. I'm sure you've been in a situation similar to this. Your supervisor sends you a form email 3 days before your one-on-one with the requisite questions about where you're meeting or exceeding expectations, and there's almost always that one section that's about the goals you set at the last meeting and what you want to do in the next month to become a better telephone sanitizer or whatever. Usually they tell you to list 5 SMART goals that are going to get you where you or they want you to be. I never filled mine out because my goal was to try moving up, which meant I'd have to shell out serious bucks for a Cisco certification course. Of course, my supervisor would basically fill it out with me and give me the standard improve your stats goals that really only ever benefited them. So, how do you use this antiquated and possibly fear-inducing strategy to learn new hobbies and make them fun? SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Everything I'm doing today follows this path. I want to learn embroidery, but embroidery is a big subject with a lot of stitches, so I'm going to choose a small project that teaches me a few of the most used embroidery techniques. There we have specific, useful stitches, and measurable, small project, which makes the project I'm working on more achievable. How is it relevant and time-bound? Well, I want to use my new embroidery skill on an upcoming project, so completing the kit works in my favor, and the sooner the better so I can have the time I need to get on to the next project. You can use the same method to learn or complete your own projects, and they really don't have to be all that complicated. Remember, I bought a small embroidery kit at a big box store for $8 and challenged myself to make it in a day. It wasn't rocket science. It doesn't need to be as complicated as your work supervisor thinks it should be because they like you to jump through hoops for their own amusement, making them look good while you slowly burn out. Just figure out what you want to do, zone in on a tiny corner of it, and give yourself an easy win. Next thing you know, you'll be doing something fantastic like embroidering Ghostbusters fan art on all your clothes. Alright, so I'm not going to say that this is easy because if you've ever watched Labyrinth, you know that the moment you say something's a piece of cake is the moment something goes wrong. But it's definitely not as difficult as Mum was leading me to believe.
For someone who has trouble even coloring within the lines using crayons, this is actually pretty good. There are times when I skipped ahead just a little bit because I wanted to make sure that the stitch was straight, and then I went back and filled in a little bit. And that's probably a beginner move on my part, but I was worried most of all that everything would come in looking diagonal, and the way that the thread is blending actually makes me very hopeful that I'm doing a good job. I may need to go in and fill in a little bit more color up in that very first section I filled in, but otherwise it's looking good. I was surprised at the amount of thread that I used in that middle dark charcoal section, but I guess considering the fact that, you know, I'm coloring within the lines and I'm trying to make sure everything is nice and straight, that's to be expected, I guess. But so far so good. I'm just going to keep trucking away at it and we'll see where we get. Maybe I'll check in again, or maybe we'll skip to the end, who knows. You also may have noticed that I am using a magnifier with a built-in light. And yes, I did finally get myself a tiny little Ottlite. Mom used to have a chest-mounted magnifier that I just can't seem to find. It's probably in a drawer or in a cabinet someplace downstairs if it's still around. But this has actually made things a little bit easier for me because, see, we've got magnification. So yes, folks, 30 bucks at Michael's gets you an Ottlite. And for that, I would like to thank my patrons because, yes, folks, because of my patrons, I can afford an inexpensive Ottlite and a tiny embroidery kit from Michael's. And I'd also like to thank my other viewers because, yes, you guys do chip in too. Thank you so very much. And yeah, if you're this far into the video and you haven't booped the like button and you're not subscribed to the channel, why? If you're this far in, you probably should hit the subscribe button because I do stuff like this all the time. I mean, lately I've been doing a lot more conventional sewing, but I do really like playing with embroidery floss and knitting and tatting. I'm hoping to get to the tatting soon. There is a project coming up that is going to really shine with the tatting, so your multiple views of my stuff leads to me being able to support those utterly wholesome habits. Anyhow, back to the sewing. Alright, so it's a couple of hours later. Had to have a break for dinner and sorted a few things out, so it's a little bit darker outside now, though it was rather overcast all afternoon, so it's gloomy no matter which way you slice it. I finished all the satin stitching, which in some areas I'm not sure whether I like what I did. You can definitely see some improvement here and there, but you know, it is what it is, and it's a learning project. You get to have a couple of those before you go on to making everything look swanky, right? I'm down to doing the stem stitching, the back stitching, and putting on the beads, so hopefully I can get those fixed up tonight. So this is our little bee buddy, and he doesn't look very much different from his picture on the kit, and that's reassuring. I did take him downstairs. I gave the fabric a press. Those folds really aren't coming out all that quickly. It's a good thing he'll be put back into his hoop. You will probably never even notice those folds are there. The square fabric is now also a circle. On the front of the fabric was a square printed out, so I just used a little bit of ink on each of the corners and found the approximate center, which was about here, right in the middle of his little bee body. From there I took a compass and I drew some very light concentric circles. This one is approximately the same diameter as the hoop, so I'd have an idea of where to place it.
This circle was going to be my stitching line, but it seemed a little too close. And this was closer to the edge of the fabric so that I would be able to have a full circle. I put in my stitch line while I was waiting for one of my neighbors to finish mowing the lawn, because as it always happens, the moment you turn on the camera and the microphone is the moment everybody in the neighborhood decides to mow their lawn. The intention is to put this fellow up on the wall in my sewing area, and apparently the hoop is the frame. If I'd been thinking, I should have picked up a frame while I was at Michael's, but that's neither here nor there. I want it to look as neat as possible, hence the stitching around the edge. Went looking for felt, couldn't find any, but I did find a scrap of wool coating. I believe this was used for making moccasins, slippers, or possibly appliques on a coat. Not sure. Either way, it's now being pressed into service here. It was just a tiny little square that I managed to eke 2 circles out of. So the smaller of the circles will go on here to keep from having anything press into it and make our design look all lumpy and bumpy. And this one will go over top of everything. I'm going to blanket stitch that and make it look nice and neat. If I have to, I'll trim it back a little bit. So I'm going to get on that and we'll see how this looks. You don't mind somebody giving you the finger.